Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a book that, well, it really shook things up in personal finance. Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad came out back in '97. It's this interesting mix, isn't it? Part story, part financial advice. And it really hinges on these two very different ways of looking at money.
Absolutely. And what we want to do for you today is really pull out the core ideas. Look at the wisdom in it, understand why it had such a huge impact. But also, we need to touch on the criticisms so you can figure out if this approach, Kiyosaki's way, is actually right for your financial path.
Yeah, and the whole thing is built around this story of his two dads.
Right.
One was, conventionally smart, educated, had a steady job. The other, well, he was the street smart investor type. And that story is basically the framework for all the advice in the book. Let's get into that. Okay, so at the heart of it, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's this contrast, his real dad, the poor dad, versus his best friend's dad, the rich dad. And this difference in how they thought, their philosophy, that's where Kiyosaki starts challenging, well, pretty much everything we think we know.
And the poor dad, he represents a path that's very familiar to many people, highly educated, focused on getting a good, secure job, believed work for your money, security, steady paycheck, climbing that corporate ladder that was his world.
Right, and then you flip it, and there's the rich dad. Not much formal schooling, Kiyosaki says, but
Yeah.
incredibly savvy with investments, with business, and his core idea, the really radical part, was making money work for you. Completely different. It's like turning the usual advice on its head. So that contrast, it's not just a story element, it's really the launch pad for all the key lessons Kiyosaki wants to teach. Stuff he says builds your financial intelligence.
Exactly. And maybe one of the biggest concepts, the one that really makes people stop and think, is his definition of assets versus liabilities. It sounds simple, but his take is different. He basically says an asset puts money in your pocket, period. A liability takes money out. And the kicker is often his example of a house. Most people think, oh, biggest asset. But Kiyosaki argues, unless it's generating income, it's actually a liability because it costs you money each month. It forces you to look at cash flow, not just, ownership or perceived value. Big shift.
That focus on cash flow really points to something missing in standard education, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Kiyosaki makes a strong case for a different kind of financial education, something beyond the classroom. What's his argument there?
Well, his core point is that traditional schooling, it just doesn't equip you with practical, real-world money skills. For him, financial intelligence isn't just about budgeting. It's understanding how money works, how taxes impact things, how investing operates, the basics of entrepreneurship. It's a much broader, more functional understanding.
And that ties into his famous phrase, the rat race. People get stuck. They earn more. They spend more. They get into more debt. We all kind of get the basic idea. But what's the nuance that Rich Dad, Poor Dad adds to that concept?
I think the subtlety is that just earning a higher salary within that system doesn't get you out. In fact, it can dig you deeper into the trap. Kiyosaki's escape route isn't just more income, it's specifically building passive income streams. Money that comes in whether you're actively working that day or not. It's about changing where your money comes from, fundamentally.
Okay, so passive income is the goal, the escape hatch. But trying to build that often involves stepping outside the comfort zone. What does the book say about mindset and risk in making that leap?
Oh, that's huge in the book. The Rich Dad philosophy is all about taking calculated risks. It's about adopting the mindset of an investor, an entrepreneur. Kiyosaki argues that fear of losing money, fear of failure, that's what holds most people back. It's a mental game as much as anything. You need a certain resilience, a willingness to try things, maybe fail, and learn from it.
Interesting. And one last core idea from this section, work to learn, not to earn. That sounds a bit counterintuitive. What's the surprising takeaway there?
Yeah, it does seem backward at first, but the idea is that when you're starting out or even changing careers, maybe the salary isn't the most important thing. Kiyosaki advises focusing on jobs where you can learn valuable skills, things like sales, marketing, understanding deals, how investments work, even if the pay isn't top tier initially. The goal is to build your personal skill set, your knowledge base, so you can eventually build wealth yourself, not just rely on a paycheck. It's a long game perspective.
Okay, so we've laid out these pretty radical ideas, challenging stuff. How did people actually react when this book came out? Let's talk about its impact, its legacy. Starting with the positive side, its strengths.
Well, its strengths are pretty clear, I think. First, the language is super accessible. He breaks down potentially complex ideas in a way almost anyone can grasp. It also offers this really empowering mindset shift, especially if you were raised with, let's say, more traditional views about money and jobs. Lots of people find it incredibly inspiring. It lights a fire under aspiring entrepreneurs and investors. And honestly, the core message about needing financial literacy and thinking about passive income that's valuable, universally valuable.
Yeah, you can definitely see the appeal. But like any book that gets this big, it's faced its share of criticism too. What are the main things people push back on?
Right, there are a few common ones. One is that it's light on concrete, practical how-to steps. It tells you what to do conceptually, but not always how to do it in detail. There's also been skepticism about whether Rich Dad was a real person or maybe more of a composite character or a teaching tool. Some critics also feel it oversimplifies complex financial situations, which could potentially mislead readers who don't dig deeper. And yeah, some people find it repetitive. He does hammer home the main points quite a bit.
Oh, so some valid points on both sides. But even with the criticisms, you just can't deny the book's massive influence.
Oh, absolutely not. The numbers are staggering. Over 40 million copies sold worldwide. It's often credited with really kicking off a much broader conversation about financial education for the average person. And it spawned this whole ecosystem, more books, the cash flow board game, which is quite popular, workshops, seminars, a whole Rich Dad brand and business. It became a phenomenon, really.
And it's interesting how it resonates particularly strongly with certain groups, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like real estate investors, people in crypto, the whole FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. How does that connect back to Kiyosaki's original ideas?
It connects directly, I think. His core message is about escaping the 9-to-5 grind by owning assets that generate income. And for many, real estate or even something newer like crypto, they see those as the kind of assets he was talking about, things that can potentially create passive income or significant capital growth outside of a regular job. It really speaks to people who are already looking for alternative paths, who are willing to challenge that conventional wisdom, which is pure rich dad thinking. So if we were to sum up our take from this deep dive, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's not your detailed financial textbook. It won't give you step-by-step investment plans. But what it is an incredibly effective, maybe even revolutionary introduction to thinking about money in a completely different way.
That's a really good way to put it. It seems perfect for you, the listener, if you're feeling stuck or just want to fundamentally shift how you view money and work. If you want to understand why financial literacy matters so much and get that jolt of inspiration to, take control, it's like the spark plug, not the whole engine.
Precisely. And because it's more about the mindset and the why. If you are looking for those specific strategies, the how-to of investing or business building, you absolutely need to follow it up with other more detailed resources. Think of it as a fantastic starting point for a different kind of financial journey, but definitely not the end point.
So thinking about everything we've discussed,
Yeah.
maybe the question for you to reflect on is this. What's one idea, one mindset shift from Rich Dad, Poor Dad that you might actually apply? And looking beyond this book, what other knowledge or skills do you need to seek out to really build on that foundation for your own unique financial future?